Hello everybody, welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and today we're talking about how there tends to be a problem with NDE, or near-death experience, and spiritual discussion groups, what that problem is, how this actually relates to why I made Afterlife Topics, why I made the Facebook group, why I wrote my first book, why I made this channel, was due to the frustration of seeing how certain subjects are handled in spiritual internet communities, and that is to say, handled very unfairly. So I have on the screen a screenshot that was sent to me by one of the members of Afterlife Topics, Ed Abanj, who's kind of pointing out how this is an example of sort of what I'm talking about here, and we'll dissect this a little bit, and hopefully this will be of some benefit to you. Before we go further, a couple notes. A lot of people were mentioning in the last video, asking if I was okay, because I guess I did seem, I seemed kind of sick in that last video, and I think I was. So I will say that in the last few days I have been feeling better, and that's partially because I spoke to a doctor, who'd have thunk it, and was given some advice that immediately helped me. I think that's been helping me be on a bit of an upswing the last few days. I hope it lasts. And I will maybe share this video later. I know a lot of other people watching have been suffering from the same issues I've been suffering from. People who got the C virus back earlier this year, but their bodies never seem to really kick it out of their systems. Very interesting stuff. I might even put something at the end of this video for you guys if you're curious about at least the advice I was given and how this may help you guys. But I'm not going to babble on about it right now because I want to get to the topic of the video. Next thing, of course, if you're new around here, my name is Cyrus. We talk about complex metaphysical subjects. We tackle spiritual subjects, life after death, out-of-body experiences, what the afterlife is really like. If you go on and hit that subscribe button, maybe do a like, share the video, helps keep this work going. If you want to get involved with me, work with me, maybe do coaching or just support the channel, PayPal email address is in the description, or just sign up as a patron or at the university classes that I do, the Afterlife University. It's not really a university, it's just we get together, we discuss complex subjects, we all hang out and do stuff like that, and talk to guests who come by and I do interviews with, so it's a lot of fun. Okay, so to continue, on one of these NDE or near-death experience forums, a thread, I guess, popped up. I didn't see it. I haven't been on that group lately, so I don't know what else was being mentioned there. But it would the question being asked was, what are people who are homosexual? What are their near-death experiences like? So Edipunch sent me this screenshot, and I guess I'll explain why here in a moment, but sort of the gist of it is that in a lot of these groups there is an underlying sense of theological Western Christian fundamentalism, even if it's just under the surface. And this correlates with sort of this, and I use the word puritanical because I'm not so sure how else to describe it, but an aversion toward anything that is quote-unquote physical. So here in this world of afterlife studies, some of the most common questions that get asked is, when I die in this world, my favorite thing is chocolate. Will I still be able to eat chocolate? My favorite thing is eating dinner with my family. Was that gone? Or my spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend passed away. Will we ever get to have sex again? Common questions that do reflect sort of like the physical activities that we are quite attached to in this world. And usually when you go to the NDE groups, unanimously you will get the response that not only are those things impossible when you die because you become a perfect being who blends with God in the theological merging process, which is all basically cooked up in churches. This is their opinion. You become this perfect being who is without any need of quote physical things, and that then there'll be this air of condescension that you are lesser evolved because you have some interest in carrying out things from this life. The problem with that is lots of experiences in the quote afterlife, the higher dimensional plane, realms of existence beyond this one, turn out to be just as physical as this world, and that the word physical becomes very wonky. Like, what actually is physical? Is anything actually physical? Experiencing a flavor or a sensation, is that really so as physical as you think it is? Sex, sexuality, very arguably not as physical as you think, not as nuts and bolts, because we're dealing with consciousness, we're dealing with experiences of consciousness. And so people tend to have experiences like this on the other side. But if you bring those experiences up in, for example, I don't know, near-death experience forums, you will be sometimes politely, sometimes not so politely chased away from that group, because it's going against what became this very dogmatic theological perspective about an afterlife. It is interesting that a lot of this comes out of the Western mindset. Western near-death experiences, very different from Eastern ones. Western ones, you got the light, you got the light of God. Sometimes it morphs into a religious being like Jesus, and it tends, even if it's indirect or it's implicit, tends to kind of line up with sort of Western Christian ideologies and values. If you look at NDEs from, I don't know, India, there usually isn't even a white light. There is nothing like that, and it's much more physical and tangible. Like you're going to a processing center, and you have to, big surprise, wait in the queue while your number gets called, and they're like, "Hello, Mr. Chakrabarty. Yes, we see that you've led a very productive life. Da 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 da. You didn't complete these parts of your life plan yet. Do you mind returning to your body?" Like, "Yes, ma'am." And then you go back. This is what Indian Eastern NDEs can be like. So very different. It's almost like there's different planes of reality for different soul groups or parts of a culture, right? But of course, in the Western mindset, the Western NDE becomes the end all be all. So going into the light, and becoming a perfect angelic being. Well, how do we know that that is actually the end all be all of the afterlife? Maybe just the people of this Western Christian mindset want to become an angelic being in a light and be pure and have no imperfections and have no worldly desires. Although something tells me that, when you learn about concepts like the hollow heavens, maybe that embodiment is a bit more fictitious than we think it is. Maybe you ascend to that point until you realize, hey, I'm kind of bored with these white robes on and floating around, and everybody else is bored too, and so let's go do something exciting. Anyway, so to get back to the main point. So the thread was about, has anybody had an homosexual type of NDE? Now, it doesn't apply so much for me, but I know many people who are LGBT, and this might be a very relevant subject. So a woman responds on that thread and says, "It's complicated. Yes, my NDE included sex and I don't even know what words I can use on YouTube. GAYSEX, even though I have zero trouble identifying as straight. The short answer is attraction is attraction, arousal is arousal. Sexual orientation is noted in the psyche but not judged. Same sex is included in the psyche, it's not excluded." So what's to note here is, though, that she's saying that she had an NDE which involved a sexual experience. So according to Ediponch, a lot of people on the NDE forum, their heads exploded when she said this. So I don't have all the other comments. I don't know where the thread is. I'm not going to look for it because, frankly, that forum kind of ticks me off when I go there. I don't like to spend a lot of time there. But here is the response. And on the surface, this response kind of like seems okay, and I agree with the elements like what the life review is a non-judgmental process, but let's kind of just think about the context, and then let's look at this woman's response. The response was, "When we have our life review that asked how much you have loved, we are not judged, we judge ourselves, and then we are asked forgiveness starting with ourselves." Okay, I mean, that's I know that concept from the NDEs. It's a self-judging product. There's no there's no vindictive God casting judgment upon you. And so that is obviously where New Age Christian theology is much nicer and much more palatable than fire and brimstone. There's a God judging you for your actions. But there's a couple of curious things about this response. Okay. First of all, look at the context. So the woman says that she had a sexual experience during her NDE, and that attraction is just attraction, arousal is arousal. And that's part of the psyche. So what does this actually have to do with the life review? It doesn't have to do with the life. She's not talking about a life review, okay? But the next part of this response that I find a bit strange is that the responder is mentioning forgiveness. So you're not judged, we judge ourselves, and then we must forgive ourselves for the things that we've done. So what does that actually have to do with anything? So to me, what they're insinuating here is that, that this person who posted this still has time to, they can still forgive themselves for their transgressions, in this case, having a sexual experience. And the poster doesn't seem to quite understand that this happened during the near-death experience. So it didn't. She's not talking about something that happened in this world and then she saw it during a life review. And apparently, Edipon said that the thread had other people though who were confused because they thought it was something that happened in the life review process, because they couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that you can have a sexual experience during a near-death experience during an out-of-body state, which I've had these as well. So they couldn't wrap their minds around that. So they were all going off of this idea that she saw a lesbian sexual experience in her life review, and that's what she was talking about. They didn't put two and two together. So anyway, so the woman who posted this originally, she had a very brilliant response, and so she says, "Not everyone gets a life review. I didn't. The psyche/astral," and I love the fact that she's using this terminology, "doesn't have a predetermined set experience." And this is so true. "It is indeed all about oneself. Theologies set up fixed processes and thereby standardize what is unique and individual." Boom. So this response really just hit the nail on the head about what is wrong with these forums, is that they have created a theological set or standard of experience. In this case, in the NDE groups, there's a standard that you're going to have a life review. There's a standard that's going to be really puritanical, really kind of leaning on Christian fundamentalism. It's going to be theological in a sense, and there's not going to be any room for icky business like sexuality. And I think that's a big problem, because for one thing, it's really sex negative. It's really shaming people if they do have an experience like this, and many people do. I've known people that their first spiritual experiences were sexual. My first spiritual out-of-body experience was of a sexual nature, and it involved, I've told this story before, that there were these two Egyptian women who were guides, and they were explaining to me that I was being watched over and protected by them, and that they were from a past life I had in Egypt. But this is all while I was recovering in a hospital from a very lengthy surgery in 2013. And so I often say that was my first out-of-body experience. And so I was being told all this, and I was told, we're going to protect you to make sure your leg does not become infected, which they did. And then, the experience evolved into a sexual experience with two very beautiful Egyptian sisters. I'm going to tell you, this is not the worst experience to have. So I still think about this one frequently. I don't always mention that element of it, but that was what happened, and I'm not going to hide it from everybody, because I'm scared that the theological New Age crowd is going to come after me, right? But since that time, I've been in contact with many people that their first experiences sometimes are of a sexual nature. And I've explored the topic quite a lot, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, the astral, as this woman says, it doesn't have a predetermined set experience. It's like this world, but truly it's even more diverse than this world. In this world, we're still bound by the limitations of this world and its culture and physical limitations, but take those limitations away, and then we're looking at the astral spectrum, where almost anything is possible. And yet in a world where almost anything is possible, so many of these NDEs, they follow a kind of fixed narrative. And that's okay, because I think certain things have to happen when you cross over. You got to have a life review so that you can figure out the life you just led, and then you have to get situated into where you're going and decide if you're going to stay or if you're going to come back. And so you get met by higher beings to help you make that decision. And then in the case of NDEs, they decide to come back, and that's why it's an NDE. So they get a junction point that they can go further into what we call the afterlife, or come back into their bodies, and they come back into the bodies. And this is how most NDEs go. But what's not reported is what happens if they continue into the afterlife, because that no one goes past that point. Interestingly, with the out-of-body experience or having spirit contact, spirit communication, that's a way that you can then get the glimpse of what goes on if you continue into the other side, and then you can learn about it a little bit from the horse's mouth, especially if you have good OBEs or clairaudient experiences, ways to communicate with that side. You can learn about what that side is like. And unanimously we're told that at a baseline, all the physical experience that's here exists over there, and then from that baseline you can then expand into much greater and better things, right? Sexuality seems to play a big role in that, in a way that we don't fully understand. We don't understand the harmony or the blend between nature in this world and nature in that world, and how these things mix together. What is a hormone? What is a, quote, chemical? What is a brain impulse? Are these also not forms of energy? What if those energy systems that we think are just quote, natural or primitive elements of the human mind here, how do we know those energy systems are not continuing to exist for different functions and purposes on that side? But on the most fundamental level, the question is, does physical experience exist? Can you have sex? Can you eat chocolate? Can you go dirt biking? And the answer that comes through, I think, almost all the legitimate spirit communication I read, personal experiences, me asking dead family members these questions when I have my experiences, the answer is always, not only is it yes, but you get looked at funny for asking the question, because it would be like asking somebody here in this world. It's like imagine like you walk up to some random person, like, is it possible to go dirt biking? How do you respond to that question? Like, what do you mean is it possible? Like, how is it not possible? So oftentimes, like, just the nature of asking people in the afterlife these types of questions, you often get met by confusion about it, because they don't know what you're talking about. Like, and then it sometimes clicks, like, oh, you're like somebody from this other spectrum, right? You're like a visitor, a traveler, and then they figure it out. And that's happened on bunch of times with my experiences, and also like other people that we talked, other people who share their experiences on the forum. So it is a relevant thing, and it's not something I've ever like stressed about so much. Like, before I ran this community, I was on other groups, and I was never like in a panic, like, oh my god, do we get to still eat chocolate? Oh my god, can we still have orgasms? Like, I wasn't in a panic about this, because I figured either the answer is yes, or there's even better things awaiting. So so it's not like something that stressed me out. But what did begin to really get on my nerves is the fact that so many other people had those questions, had those concerns, and they were met by some form of puritanical judgment. It seems like what we're looking at here, even though it's an innocent response, like if you dig beneath the surface, it's like, why are we talking about forgiving ourselves? Like, for what does this poster need to forgive herself for the fact that she had like a lesbian experience on the astral spectrum during an NDE? And is it not true that people who have the non-conventional near-death experiences are either bullied or just intimidated not to share them, because you get the theological puritanical crew that immediately dives in there? And This whole debate has re-erupted on the Facebook group because a couple of people posted threads concerning sex. I honestly wish people would stop posting these, but again, we're looking at hundreds of responses and some really goofy responses, and a lot of these same people from the puritanical theological crowd joining the Facebook group. And I'm going to say, look, the Facebook group is not going to be a safe space if you're going to come in there and cast judgment, or you're going to spread those types of ideas. It's a free speech zone, which means that I'm not going to kick you out, or me or any of the admins are not going to kick you out for expressing your opinion, but you're going to get that opinion challenged. So when someone is asking about, like, one of the threads was asking if it's possible to become pregnant on the astral plane, which I think is a very good question. I think I've brought this up maybe in one video on this channel, and it deserves more thought. And there was some interesting sub-threads I think answer it. But a lot of these keyboard warriors are on that post, just making these knee-jerk reactions like, no, that's a human function, and we have no need for human, earthly, dirty things on that side. There is no sex, so you cannot become pregnant, blah, blah, blah. Or we don't have bodies. We're floating orbs of light, or orbs of mist, or angelic, just like little angelic cupids or cherubs floating on a cloud. So how can you do that if you're a couple of cherubs? I don't know what these people are thinking, but these are not very well thought out responses, and honestly, it's really getting on my nerves. But periodically that subject comes up, and there's a lot of fighting that results in it. There's this one lady I was fighting with on that thread, and she was basically, she said something to the effect of, sexuality is a human perversion of the mind. And look, what I gotta say to people like that is, you create your reality. If you hate sexuality, you will go to a world where there is none. I like sexuality, and it's not just because of the old, the physical act. It's because it adds like this depth to the relationships between the sexes, or also obviously the LGBT situations as well. But it adds that depth, right? The physical attraction, the feeling that allure, as a man, I see a beautiful woman, you feel that allure. As a woman, they see a man, that they feel that connection. It creates that depth, and I think that's an incredibly important component of the human experience. And what I don't like is the idea of, like, if that was neutered out of a realm of existence, then we're looking at a net negative, something that's taking away from that experience. But I'll accept it if the information was coming in was saying that there is no sexuality. But look, even the most wishy-washy new age sources of information, like Channeling Eric, says that there's sexuality. Like, almost all the spirit communication sources talk about this, but somehow people take it upon themselves to tell everybody what the multiverse, what the infinite spectrum of the universe is like, to tell people that some things are off limits because they say so. That's all I have for this rant. Thanks for watching. As promised, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, like, my health and what I've been doing to feel better the last few days, in case it can help some of you guys. If you don't want to listen, just shut the video off, and we can end it here. And of course, get involved. AfterlifeTopics.com. Pick up a book like Understanding Life After Death, with the Afterlife and Beyond. Those are on Amazon. I talk more about sex, more about these subjects in those books, more debunking of new age garbage. Yeah, of course, you can join the Facebook group as well. Anyway, okay, so on to the health segment. So it's very interesting. Since I got back to the USA, I think I've been sicker. So I've been sick for about 5 months. But since I first came down with acute C virus, COVID, back when I was stuck in Philippines, and I blogged a lot about that on this channel, what I was going through. So since I've been back, I noticed like some more symptoms emerging, and the fatigue was getting worse, to the point a couple of weeks ago I literally couldn't even leave my bed. I could barely lift my arm up. I'm in bed wondering, hey, am I gonna die? Is it time to call the ambulance? And just kind of eking that out. And this was like a couple days before I put the video up where I went to, a few days before I put the video up where I went to Santa Monica. And that's probably why I look kind of drained, because I'd been dealing with a lot of really bad symptoms. Anyway, so I was basically talking to this doctor who said, look, how many supplements are you taking? I'm like, I said, I'm taking a lot. I want to get this virus out of my body. And it's like, look, you probably don't have a virus. What's going on is your immune system went into overdrive and it doesn't know how to shut itself back off. So if you're taking any kind of supplement that is boosting your immune system, you're actually feeding the problem. So I got off the zinc, I got off the quercetin, I got off the echinacea, I got off especially the vitamin C, because I was mega dosing vitamin C every single day for the last month, about 3,000 milligrams a day. And I'd say that day that I got off the vitamins, I felt a little bit less fatigued. And the next day, almost no fatigue. Next day, very little fatigue. The next day was yesterday. I felt fatigue, but not so bad. I could still function. I could go out. I could do stuff. And it kind of went away later in the day. And now today is what, the 23rd of August, and feel a little funny today, but I'm not getting the fatigue. I'm not getting the other weird symptoms that I usually get. Last night I had some weird, like almost like, feels like fibromyalgia, possibly like also a symptom of multiple sclerosis. Like I get like the electrical pains in my legs. It was not fun, but that went away after about like an hour and a half. But that's also an immune system manifestation. And I think it just further proves the point that, like the condition I've been suffering with all of its weird symptoms that a lot of the people in the quote long haul community have been dealing with, I'm leaning toward what these doctors are saying, which is that it's a immune system problem, because the virus goes into the brain. Your brain doesn't know how to handle being attacked by something that goes through the blood-brain barrier, and so it cranks the immune system into hyperdrive, and unfortunately this is what seems to take people's lives, and that's why I think steroids and things like that are helping a lot of people at the onset, because that lowers the immune system. But then you have two things. You have the virus, which is really difficult to get rid of, or if you're one of the people who have flipped out on my channel because you have to believe that it's 5G radiation, then okay, the 5G radiation causes the the 5G radiation, that is rather the virus, is causing symptoms as well as your immune system. So you have these two different battles happening, and when you finally beaten off the pathogen, then what's still left though is that immune system problem, and that's going to actually mirror some of the viral symptoms. So so instead of taking vitamin C, instead of thinking that you need to take all these supplements, you're literally making it all worse. This is probably why I got sicker when I got home, because I thought I'm gonna beat this thing finally, and that's why I have a frickin' alchemical laboratory of supplements on my shelf, popping all these to try to fix myself. And all along, I think, based on what a different expert in this area then later told me, what I really need is probably some fish oil. Helps with the inflammation, keeps the helps the brain, keeps things healthy. Maybe some probiotics. Just eat healthy, and go outside, get some vitamin D, get some sunlight, and that's it. I don't need to take a million supplements, and especially don't take the vitamin C, because it just keeps your immune system going into overdrive. Anyway, so that's what's working for me, but discuss it with your doctor. Don't take my advice. And maybe if you're one of the people also suffering from this, that may help. One more thing is, I also think a anti-inflammation diet may go a long way. Some people saying the ketogenic diet really helps with this, because you're really getting away from the sugary foods that cause inflammation. But maybe just giving up sugar, or minimizing sugar anyway, is a really great idea regardless of what happens. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm telling you, and I try to avoid, it's hard because I know sucralose isn't so healthy, but like this Gatorade Zero, like it tastes great. I don't notice that it's sugar free at all. And so anyway, so that's my health update. Thanks for watching. Hope this was of some use to some of you guys. This is Afterlife Topics. I'll catch you guys on the next video.